Please welcome Tom Steyer.
God.
Yeah, good actually just have you over here.
Okay.
I'm just going to run through a little bit about how this evening will go. We'll talk a little bit about your vision for California, your campaign. Then we're going to start getting some questions from our audience. We tried to select audience members with kind of a cross-section of topics and questions. Audience members are going to read their own questions. KQED did not edit these ahead of time, and we did not share them with Tom Steyer ahead of time. And then we'll give you a chance to respond, and then maybe I'll have some follow-ups along the way. So if that's all okay, we can get started.
Great.
We are in the stretch run here, 1 week until Election Day. And it's been interesting hearing you kind of articulate your closing message to California voters. I think a big part of that hearing from you has been this idea of judge me by my enemies. I've heard you say that kind of on the campaign trail as we get close to Election Day. What does that mean to you, judge me by my enemies?
Well, one of the things that's happened in this race is that I have been talking about the need for California to be affordable for Californians, and that there are corporate special interests in this state driving up the costs in virtually every area. And that for us to actually make California affordable for Californians, we're going to have to make some structural changes that are going to disadvantage some of those corporate special interests. And as a result, they have spent $50 million trying to prevent me from becoming governor, and have spent an awful lot of money backing anybody but me. So, PG&E, which is the local electric monopoly, has spent over $12 million. Chevron has spent a lot of money. The second biggest oil driller has, Meta has, Uber has, the largest lobby group against single payer has, and then a lot of very rich people have been backing everybody but me. And so I say, look, if you know that Chevron is spending millions of dollars against me, you know something, which is I do have an environmental program. I do think polluters should pay. And I've been talking about the need for a windfall profits tax. And if PG&E is spending $12 million plus against me, you know that I'm going to do something about electric rates. And that they think I'm going to do something about electric rates, because none of these corporations invest because they like somebody. They spend money against me because they don't like what I'm going to do. And so their opposition, or the fact that Trump has posted negative things about me, or the head of ICE has posted negative things about me, says something. I can't get them to do that. They're doing that of their own free will. So if you look at the people who are spending money or going online to oppose me, it's a pretty good sense that, okay, I must be on the other side of those questions. And in every one of those, I'm very proud to have those people opposing me, because I am. And I honestly would be ashamed to be some of the other people running for governor who are taking their money, because by definition, if you're taking money from some of these corporations, then that means they believe for sure you're going to do their bidding. That's why they're giving the money, that they're investing in their future bottom line. And if I would be ashamed for that, because my whole goal in this campaign is to work without conflict and without compromise for working Californians in this state. And if I were taking money from some of these corporations, I'd know that I would have to compromise and that I would have to do their bidding, and I'm not going to do that.
If you win this election and you become governor, all of those enemies are still going to be there. PG&E is still going to be our largest utility in Northern California. The California Medical Association is still going to be there representing doctors at the Capitol. So how would you build productive relationships with those?
Well, I'd start by not using the words enemy. I really would.
So that ends after the campaign.
I don't see it that way. I see it differently. They're pursuing an interest. Look, take PG&E. They're an electric monopoly. They charge Californians twice as much as the average in the United States of America. Okay, I don't want Californians to pay twice as much as the average. I always go outside on a bright sunny day and go like, does the sun not shine in California? Is there some reason we don't have cheap electricity here? And so I want to represent, that doesn't make them an enemy. They are following what we've set up in what is an electric monopoly where you get paid based on how many capital expenditures they make. And they're doing that rigorously to make as much money, and they're making record profits. Okay, I want to change that, and I don't believe in monopolies. Like, everyone acts like introducing competition to electricity generation, storage, and distributions is communism. It's like, that's not communism. When there's competition in the world, that's how we keep prices down, and that's how we take advantage of new innovation and, you know, the ability of people to do things cheaper. So I don't look at them as doing something evil. I look at them as following their interests rigorously against the interest of working people, and I'm on that side of working people. So I'm going to change the rules to the extent I can so we drive down prices so people aren't paying twice as much. It's just not right.
Yeah. You've talked about, I mean, change, I think, is also a big message of your campaign, kind of taking on the status quo in California politics. I'm curious if you see the current governor, Gavin Newsom, as the status quo, and where do you feel like he's failed to make that structural change?
Well, I think that Governor Newsom actually is a progressive, and I think we share an awful lot of values. I think that there are a couple of things that I want to do that he hasn't wanted to do.
Like what?
For instance, as an example, I've said for this state to work, the billionaires and big corporations need to pay their fair share. And frankly, for those of you who have watched every one of these debates, first of all, I pity you. Second of all, look, they had the seven candidates with the highest, polling numbers on stage, and asked them who would, vote to support a billionaire's tax, and only one person said yes, and it was me. And yet we look at a state, we have the richest state in the country, we have the most billionaires, we have the highest poverty rate. We don't have a school system in the top 10, we're somewhere in the 30s. We used to be number 1. We are struggling in many ways to deliver the things that the people of California need. And so, I look at this, I look at that as something that has to happen in a smart way so that we can have what I call shared prosperity. We have prosperity, it's just not being shared. And I always say, 12 trillionaires and 40 million people who can't make rent is not success. Yeah. On average, it looks like success, but if you go around California and see how people are living, and you see people fully employed for 20 years living in their cars, you see people giving up health care to make rent, you see people really, really struggling who are fully employed, who have, played by the rules, done the right things, it's not working for them. We need to make some substantive changes. And I want to do it in a way that we keep our prosperity, but I absolutely believe that the working people of this state are struggling way more than fair. And they're not getting served the way they should, and part of it is about that. And we could go through all the different things I'm doing. Some of them are different, certainly from anyone else running for governor.
Mm-hmm. You've spent an awful lot of your own money on this campaign. I think it's up over $213 million at this point. I'm curious how you think about the ways in which you might use your wealth as governor.
So we are the largest, most populous, richest state in the United States of America. We are the leading voice for progressive ideas and imagining a just future in the United States of America. If California can't get this right for working people in the 21st century, when we are half of the growth in the United States, when we are 60% of the world's AI valuations, California, with the kind of money we have, with the kind of wealth we're creating, if we can't make this work broadly for the 40 million people who work here, I think that's a terrible statement for the world, and it's terrible for the people who work here. I am going to commit. I mean, my wife, Kat Taylor, is sitting in the front row, and we have worked together over the decades to get, on multiple things, and we're completely committed to getting kind of a just, equitable, successful, prosperous California. And, when you ask me what am I willing to do, look, we've pledged to give our money away while we're alive. I know what you're asking. You're asking me, am I going to run propositions with my money guy? I know that's your question. And I'm answering in a broader way to say which we are in this period. We are in this for everything we have in terms of energy, everything we have in terms of wealth. We are in to try to make this state better. And that is what we've been trying to do. This is not new. Running for governor what things I'm pushing for are completely consistent with what I've been doing for the last 14 years, and certainly Catherine's been doing it as well. We are absolutely committed to working for working people, for preserving the natural world, to addressing the structural issues in California so people have better lives, and to prove to people again that the government of the state can make their lives better, that they can actually think about buying a home, that that's a possibility, that we can expect to have great education, that the government is going to succeed in getting things done, and that we're building a great society together. That is, there is no limit to how much I care about that.
Yeah. All right, let's welcome up our first questioner this evening.
Good evening. My name is Beth Sheba-Ternage. I'm an energy consultant, energy conservation consultant from Concord. And my question is, economic vitality, affordable housing, and top-tier education, crucial to California's future, compete for resources very often. As governor, how will you balance keeping businesses in state while expanding housing and raising education standards for all?
So that's a great question. Let me say this. In the past 15 years, I've run 3 statewide propositions. All of them have raised or protected billions of dollars for California in either education or healthcare without costing Californian citizens a penny, and none of them have hurt us economically. So, if you look at what I'm proposing in this race, I'm proposing to close a corporate real estate tax loophole called split roll that's failed before, which is worth $20 billion a year to the state of California and specifically to the counties. A little under half of it under Prop 98 will go to education. The rest of it will go overwhelmingly to healthcare. In answer to your question, do I believe specifically there that will harm our economy in some way? No. As I like to say, no one is moving Disneyland to Austin, Texas, Miami, Florida, or Reno, Nevada. The truth is, doing things, we have big tax loopholes, people are not paying their fair share, and we have to think about actually raising revenues in ways that do not cause businesses to want to leave the state, that actually are practical, that get the job done without giving disincentive or hurting businesses. So the other thing that we're talking about doing, just so you know, for instance, we're talking about something called Water's Edge, where corporations get to declare where they make their money for part of their income, and it costs the state about $4 to $5 billion a year. Does anyone in this room get to declare where they earn their money and they say it's Ireland? I don't. So to a large extent, I absolutely believe that the billionaires and corporations should pay their fair share. And I want to do it in a way so that they are good citizens, so they pay their fair share, so that they can take pride in creating the kind of society we all know California should be, but it doesn't hurt their business and doesn't give them an incentive to move someplace else. And I went to Stanford Business School. I built a business from 0 to $38 billion. I think I know something about business. And so I'm going to be very intent on making sure that we do this in a way that works and works for business. So that's why I said to Guy, I don't want to call these people my enemies. I don't want that. I'm for shared prosperity. And you know what? You can't share prosperity if there's no prosperity.
Disneyland might not be going anywhere, but here's the office vacancy rates we're dealing with in first quarter of 2026 in the Bay Area. 31% in San Francisco, 31% in San Jose, almost 38% in downtown Oakland. Is now the right time to be raising taxes on
Well, let
real
me make
estate?
a point. Let's talk for a second about commercial real estate, office real estate in the Bay Area. Something happened. What happened was we had a COVID epidemic, and a lot of people decided that they could work from home. And as a result, we had an awful lot of people who didn't want to make the commute, didn't have to make the commute, and realized, oh my God, an hour and a half each way is 3 hours a day that I can spend with my family and have a better life. And so we have reduced demand for office space in the Bay Area. Okay, I agree with that. That isn't something about people leaving the Bay Area. That isn't a knock on San Francisco. That's a change in our society where people want to do just the way they do distant learning, they do distance medicine, and they want to work from home to a large extent. I completely understand that. The question in my mind is when we look at those cities where we don't have enough housing, and I'm one of the people who believes that we should be building houses in the city around public transportation, okay, does anybody see we have buildings we don't need and buildings we need to build in the same place?
But you're saying to those office landlords you want to raise their taxes.
The taxes will be based on the value of the building, Guy. So that Disneyland, the value has shot up. You're talking about valuing things. An empty office building is not worth a lot, you guys, just so you know. It's worth the land underneath it. So in every one of these cases, there's no injustice here.
Okay.
There's no injustice here. Asking people to pay real estate taxes based on the actual value of their real estate for corporations, that's not unjust, that's completely fair. Truthfully.
Love to welcome up our second questioner.
Hello, I'm April Northrup. I'm a school board member in Belmont Redwood Shores School District. Many school districts in California are facing declining enrollment and subsequently declining funding from the state, leading to layoffs and school closures. Will you work with the legislature to increase per pupil spending?
So let me say this. When I talk about split roll, that I'll call a special election on day one to basically close this corporate real estate loophole, by law, almost half of that money goes to schools. And I absolutely want that to happen because I want to talk for a second about education. And let me say, both of the teachers' unions in this state have endorsed me. The school employees have endorsed me. And there's a reason for it, because there is a myth in California that we're paying a lot for teachers and they're not doing a good job, and that somehow the system and the accountability has broken down. The truth is, if you look on a cost-adjusted basis, we pay something in the 30s out of 50 states. We're not in the top half, and we're not close to it. If you go to the research, the number one thing that makes kids have good outcomes is excellent teachers. It's not, I always thought it was teacher-student ratio, but the number one thing by far is how good are the teachers. So if you think about that from a common sense standpoint, you want excellent teachers. You have to recruit them, you have to train them, and you have to retain them. It's very hard to hire teachers in California because they can't afford to live in the districts where they're teaching because they're not very well compensated for California. We don't spend enough on training. Catherine and I have a good friend who's a third-year teacher. She's had 1 hour of training in those 3 years. And then it's hard to retain them. So I want that money to go through the teachers so that we get the outcomes for the kids. And I think it's absolutely critical, and I want it to go disproportionately to the school districts that are most vulnerable, where the kids need it the most. But that's something where, look, great societies take care of their kids. The kids are literally the future of our society. If we're not training them for the 21st century, I don't know how we think that we're going to be competitive with people around the world. So my mom was a teacher, taught in some very, low-income public schools, and then she taught in prison when she retired from teaching in public schools. My brother's been an advocate for at-risk kids his whole life. I'm absolutely intent on making sure that the young people in our society are taken care of, that we deliver for them, and we have the money for it. And that's a big reason I'm for, passing split roll.
Yeah.
That money is needed in our school systems for this state to be great at schools, and we absolutely have to be great at school if we're going to be the state we want to be.
That idea, though, raising split roll, raising commercial property taxes, you hinted at this. It was on the ballot in 2020, huge Democratic electorate. The measure did not pass. So give me one way your campaign would be different.
So let me say this. We took on, in 2010, the oil companies. And they were trying to gut cap and trade. And everybody told us, you never beat the oil companies in the state of California. You're a fool. You're a naive fool. And I did it with a Republican, George Shultz, who was a good friend of mine and I believe to be a good man. And we got 70% of the vote. And George, who was 89 years old, would always say, we're not going to beat the oil companies. We're going to smash the oil companies. And we did. And we took on the tobacco companies. In 2016, 20 years, the legislature had not passed adequate tobacco taxes. Once again, people said this is never going to work, and we easily won. Look, this is an idea whose time has definitely come. They lost 52-48 in 2020. I know that. I also know this is an idea whose time has come, and we need to make that clear to people. And every time, and the third time, people also said we'd lose to the out-of-state companies that were rooking us on their state income taxes in California, and we beat them handily too. This is something that is fair. We're not asking for something unfair in any way, shape, or form. The money is necessary for California to progress. And so in the past, when that's been true, I've picked my fights when I believe it's absolutely just and absolutely necessary, and we've won by a lot. And I expect to win by a lot, if you want to know the truth.
Because
to me,
people would
this
say
is
harder to take on, when you're talking about property taxes, it's businesses across the state. It's one thing to beat a tobacco company. This seems to be a more difficult task, no?
Well, first of all, it'll only be larger companies, so it's not going to be all the small mom and pop businesses. But also, look, there's a sense in California, certainly on the corporate side, that they own us. Honestly. I mean, the idea that PG&E thinks they have a right to a legal monopoly in the state of California and they will do anything to protect it, I mean, pardon me, but I disagree completely. The idea that literally the head of the Western States Power Association, which is the lobby for the oil companies and for Chevron, said in a hearing in Sacramento 2 weeks ago, it is the duty of Chevron to extract every penny they can from Californians and use the Iran war to do it. Do I think that's okay? No. And do I think it's, do I believe that we're running this state for corporations? I don't. I believe we're running this state for working people. And that is actually what this entire race for governor is about, is are the working people of this state going to be fairly treated or not? And this is a perfect example. There's no reason that corporations should be paying real estate tax based on 1970s valuations. It's a loophole. It's a straight up loophole. And everybody loves loophole. If the people in this audience and you and I had a $20 billion loophole, we would think of an explanation for why it's unfair to change it. But the truth is, it isn't unfair to change it. And what I'm talking about doing is not unjust. It's actually fair. And that's why I brought it up, because Disneyland should pay taxes based on the value of Disneyland, not the value of Disneyland in the 1970s. And that's the truth. And they're making billions of dollars. So, empty office buildings are not going to pay high taxes because they're not worth anything. But in all of this stuff, in thinking about how to change this, and this was my point, we need to have the revenue to have this state deliver the services people need. And we need to do it in a just way that doesn't hurt business.
Yeah.
And of course, people are going to argue that they don't want to pay more taxes because they always say that. But this is an absolutely fair thing where they have a loophole that they should never have gotten. And they've been riding it for 40 or 50 years. And I don't think it's fair, and I think we should end it.
Love to welcome our next questioner.
Hi, Tom. My name is Lena Shaw, and I have been executive assistant in the finance industry for over 15 years. I live here in San Francisco. I was fortunate to live in my rent-controlled apartment for over 20 years. When I moved, the owner updated it and put it out on the market for $3,100 a month in rent from my $850 a month in rent. So my direct question is, how are you going to lower housing costs in California? The how is what I'm asking, as landlords seem to charge whatever they want.
So let me start with the question about rent, and then let me talk about how we're going to drop both the cost of housing overall. Because ultimately, the only way we drop the cost of housing is by building a lot more housing a lot cheaper. But in the meantime, I want to make sure that people understand I'm for greatly expanding the renter's credit, because if California is unaffordable for Californians, the biggest bill at the end of every month for almost everybody is their housing bill. It's either their rent check or their mortgage check, and it is eating people up. So I want people to know I want to greatly expand the renter's credit, because people get to write off their mortgage payment, but they don't get to write off their rent, and that's not fair. And I also want to enforce the rental protections that prevent rent spikes. But let me talk about how we're going to build housing, because it's, there are tens of thousands of permitted zoned units in the city of San Francisco that are not being built because they can't be built to a price that anyone can afford. So it's not just a question of permitting and zoning, which is everybody's supposition. So let's just start with, we do need to permit faster and cheaper. That is, time is money in real estate, and we need to simplify this and get a whole bunch of agencies doing conflicting permitting shorter. And we do need to zone. I do believe what I was saying to you, Guy, which is we want to build in cities around public transportation or in towns around public transportation for a whole bunch of reasons. Catherine and I started a nonprofit community bank that has financed 17,000 low-income housing units. Let me say this. The state of California has a bigger balance sheet than we do by a fair bit. We are not using that balance sheet effectively in terms of helping people build and helping people buy. So that means not only lending money at subsidized rates, but also doing down payment assistance. That is a huge balance sheet. We can definitely use it to help. And then there are two more things that I think are critical in terms of actually building. I've said we'll build 1 million houses that people can afford. We can't keep building the way we're building physically. And there are technologies now to basically industrially construct houses off-site and assemble them on-site. And that right now drives down the cost about a quarter. And I believe that there are economies of scale that will, as they get bigger and get better, they will drive the cost down more. And that is critical. A 25% drop in cost per square foot by using technologies. And we can use the government to help them do that and to drive it down further. And the last thing is this. The counties of this state do not want to build housing. They would all much rather have a used car lot that pays taxes and doesn't use services than have new housing that will be filled with what I think are called people who require services for healthcare. They require services for the education of their kids. And the counties don't have the money to take care of those people. That's why they charge big upfront fees, up to 20% the cost of the house. And that's why they push back all the time to try and prevent housing. And the point about passing split roll, it is about education and it is about healthcare, but it is also about saying to the counties, building housing is not an unfunded mandate for you anymore. We are not asking you to take care of people and not giving you any money to do it. In fact, we're giving you the money to do it. And that is something that I think is a huge lever to work with the counties to get them to stop pushing back against any housing, which has gone on for decades. California used to build a lot of houses. We don't anymore. And the opposition of cities and counties is probably the single biggest reason for that. And split roll is a very important lever using money to grease the skids to get housing built.
Quickly on rent, currently the state has a cap of around 10% for, they call it rent gouging, but for rent increases. That expires in 2030. Would you support extending that, lowering the allowable rent?
We absolutely have to have something like that. That was actually a bill that was passed with the support of big property owners, big apartment holders. We absolutely need something like that. Personally, I would like to see something lower than 10%.
Okay.
10%, if you do that compound, that is a really high compound, you guys. And so we are seeing, look, if you go around this state, you really do see people living in their cars who've been fully employed for 20 years. The fastest growing people of the homeless population, the fastest group is over 65 years old. These are people who can't make rent or lost their house. So when we think about what's going on here, it is absolutely critical that we build this housing and that we drive down the coast. It's critical, and people are suffering. So this is not something that we can take our time about and, scratch our heads and ponder it. We have to get going, and we've got to do this because it really is hurting us, and it is the number one cost for people, and it's the number one reason. It's good for families, it's good for businesses. It is a huge problem for businesses that housing is so expensive in California and that healthcare is so expensive. It just is. That's one of the reasons it's hard to be a business in California.
Next questioner, Zach Holmes, are you here? Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Steyer. I'm Zach. I'm an impact investor in Oakland. My question is about AI and the effects on the workforce. California is the world's capital of innovation. It's also where some of the most consequential decisions for society will be made during the next governor's term. According to the tracker jobslost.ai, over 250,000 people have been affected directly by AI-related layoffs so far, and OpenAI and Anthropic's own research says this is just the beginning. What specific policies will you put in place to best support workers in this period of change, while also ensuring that we continue to be the hotbed of technological progress?
So that, of course, is an incredibly important question in this governor's race, but it's an important question for this state. And I want to say that one of the great policy failures of my lifetime has been watching the failure in the Midwest of the United States to protect workers, particularly in the auto industry, but also in a lot of other industries, when international competition and mechanization hollowed it out. And if you look at what happened to the big cities of the Midwest, to Detroit, to Gary, to Akron, to Cleveland, it really was a hollowing out of the whole society. And that is something that we cannot have happen in the state of California as a result of AI. So I will say we have a very detailed AI policy on our website. In all of these things, if you want to get into more gory detail than I will tonight, I encourage you to go on our website. Better than Sominex, cheaper. But let me say this about AI, because I shouldn't joke about it, because it's deadly serious. The number one thing about AI is we have to protect workers. And it's unclear exactly how much it's going to affect workers, because people have a lot of different estimates. But this is something that could be absolutely brutal for workers in multiple across society. And we have said our number one policy on AI is going to be to protect workers. And that is going to be AI. We want it to be a tool for workers, not a replacement of workers. And we've said we are going to have a huge government effort up front to make sure that we have training for people to get good jobs. There are a lot of jobs in California that need people. And the question is, are people trained for those jobs? And every one of the people, we're going to train for a specific job, and we're guaranteeing. And let me say, how are we going to pay for that? Because one of the issues in this race is people are promising a lot of things, but it's not free to have a gigantic training program. I think we'll do it through the community colleges, which I absolutely adore and that are set up to do this. And we'll do it in conjunction with businesses and with government agencies, so that you're working for a specific job at a specific wage at a specific time. But the idea of how to pay for this, I shamelessly stole from the head of Anthropic, Dario Amodei, who said, if this is going to happen and it's necessary to take care of these people, and what we'll do is we'll have a very small fee for every calculation done by an AI company. And that money will go to protect workers. That first and foremost, that will be to make sure that we're taking care of workers, that if people lose their jobs, we're retraining them. For young people, we are training them for the jobs that there no longer exist. And let me say this, the estimates on AI, no one really knows exactly how this is going to turn out. And you know, I've talked to the most experienced people from the policy side and the heads of these companies. Nobody really knows. But the estimates are that it's somewhere between huge and unbelievably huge. That's the range. And so if it turns out to be unbelievably huge, and the money for this is more than enough to protect workers, which, this is all hypothetical. But if it is, we're going to use that as a sovereign wealth fund for California so that we can pay for things that we want to do, but we can't do now, like childcare for everybody in the state of California. Only 16% of the people who qualify for subsidized childcare get it. And this is something where, look, when you think about, the Pope just came out with an encyclical on this yesterday. And he was basically saying, we can't run a society for corporations and machines. We're a society of people. And if we're going to have a new innovation, which we're very proud of, that California is leading the world again in imagining the future and creating the future, great, but we can't have it hollow out the people of this state and leave them in the lurch. We can't be so anxious to win at the very top, and the people in these companies are creating wealth at an literally, historically unimaginable rate. We can't have that happen where all these people are being put out of jobs, are being impoverished as a result of a machine basically taking all the information and experience and creativity of society and charging for it and putting out of work all the people who actually have the experience and the creativity and have put in all the work so that can happen.
Yeah. Elon Musk has an opinion about all of this, unsurprisingly. He said universal high income via checks issued by the federal government is the best way to deal with unemployment caused by AI. And I think you hear some arguments like that, when you talk about training, people think, oh, here we go again with NAFTA, promises of training and getting people into new jobs. Why not base it on just giving money to people?
So let me talk about that for a second, and I'm going to come out. I know this is going to seem surprising. I'm going to come out on the side of the Pope instead of on the side of Elon Musk. The Pope is talking about the dignity of human beings, the dignity of work, the meaning of purpose, supporting people in having a meaningful life. And that's what I'm in favor of, just so you know. And by the way, Elon Musk is creating money in California, built his companies in California. California subsidized the heck out of his companies. And last I talked, he's talking about a lot of money going to people, but he moved out of California for some reason to a state that doesn't have income tax. So I'm not going to listen too much to what Elon Musk says now or ever.
But on the idea.
Look, I'm telling you, in my opinion, healthy societies have people participating, building things together. Healthy societies, people work and use their talents to create things, and that's what California has always been about. And I think it's absolutely important in this state that we support working people, that we support them across the board, that we enable them, that we help train them, and that we take that as a serious charge for our state, and I absolutely do. And that's exactly what the Pope is talking about, and I believe he's right.
Yeah. Love to welcome our next questioner.
Hi, Tom. I'm Julie Hamilton from Marin County. I'm a director of growth strategy at an e-commerce company. And my question is, women make 88 cents to the dollar that men earn and are overrepresented in lower paying roles and underrepresented in top paying ones. Childcare has much to do with that. How do you plan to improve women's ability to join and succeed in the workforce?
So let me say that about childcare specifically, I want to start by saying I specifically referenced childcare with regard to the token tax or the fee on calculations for AI companies, because childcare for working families in this state is like another mortgage. And it is an absolute limiting factor on women's being able to succeed in business for sure. And that's why I was saying I'm absolutely intent on, if we have money left over from that, having it go to childcare, because only 16% of the people who qualify for subsidized childcare actually get it in the state of California. And it is absolutely critical. But I want to say something else about women in the workforce and structural genderization, I don't know if that's a word, and racism. If you go through and look at the jobs that were traditionally done by women, so whether that's a teacher or a nurse or a home care worker or a child care worker, those are jobs that traditionally have been dramatically underpaid compared to the jobs that are traditionally done by men. And so as we watch the changes in society and you look and see, so if you ever have a chance to go and see what home care or child care workers do on a daily basis, it's incredibly hard. It's incredibly skilled. They are very lowly paid. They mostly don't get benefits. They mostly don't get paid vacation, and they mostly don't get retirement. And that's a classic woman's job. If you look at teachers, that is a profession. Those are professional people who are critical for our state. They're critical for our society. It's not a well-paid profession. And that is traditionally a woman's job, and that's why we're here. And let me say that my goal in thinking about compensation, in thinking about fairness, is to always try to call out the structural injustices in our society, because unless you call them out, then you don't intentionally redress them. And so we're talking about women and specific women's jobs, but I can tell you this is certainly something that happens based on race. And so there has been structural racism. That's really the reason Kat and I started a nonprofit community bank, was to lend money and to give credit to communities that the commercial banks had redlined forever. And so I don't think it's possible to solve those problems without first announcing them and then trying to intentionally address them to the extent you can. And I think for women, it's very clear why that's true. Going after childcare as a critical thing for justice as well as for, productivity, I think is a critical thing. And so in every one of these instances, I'm going to try and be proactive about pointing out the traditional injustice and therefore the need to intentionally address it. It's certainly true for women.
Yeah. Awesome. I'd love to welcome up our final questioner this evening.
Hello, Tom. My name is Ryan Motzik. I'm a Bay Area born and raised small business owner. I also run a neighborhood organization in this neighborhood called the Mission Merchants Association. We work with small businesses. My question is, in places like San Francisco, extreme wealth exists alongside worsening street conditions. And in many ways, that wealth seems to have exacerbated the problem rather than improved it. How would you ensure that California's economic success actually translates into safer streets, better transit, and a higher quality of life for everyone?
So let me say this is a critical issue in our state. And I've been trying to directly or indirectly address it throughout this campaign and throughout this evening. That basically we have a state with the greatest inequality in the United States of America. And it's worsening. And therefore, when I think about it, what I'm saying about this state is this, and it's going to come out in terms of how I think about what's a fair share and how people should be treated. And my basic point about San Francisco and California and the United States is these places have been built by working people. Sacrifices by working people. Yesterday was Memorial Day. Sacrifices by poor kids who stood up for democracy and freedom for hundreds of years. And as we look at this state, the idea that anybody earns their money themselves, to me, is not only wrong, but upsetting. Because this is a society that has been built by the sacrifices of working people, of poor people, of illiterate people for hundreds of years to stand up, to make it possible for people to come here and imagine the future and create these companies and have these great successes. And I think it's absolutely important that when we think about the society we're trying to create, to remember all those kids, the ones for the last 100 years, the ones today, the people doing home care, the people teaching in the schools, the nurses, the people who make this state work and run and possible. And so when I think about, look, what I'm talking about, I want to have vibrant cities. The future of California has to be building in cities. They have to be safe streets, and they have to be, we have the great advantage of being the Rainbow Coalition. There's incredibly interesting people across this state that we all can learn from each other and have a very fun, wonderful experience in doing it. And that is what these cities have got to be about. And so to a very large extent, we need to have that, and we've got to invest in that, and we've got to create it. And that is something that everybody can share and everybody can take pride in. And that's exactly what my campaign is trying to create that society that is shared prosperity, but it's also shared culture, shared learning, shared fun. And I think that's what, California, let's remember for a second, this is a really fun place to live. Like, we've forgotten that. It's supposed to be, this is incredibly, gloriously beautiful, filled with brilliant, creative, fun-loving people. Let's remember that. And let's have that in our cities. And remember how fun it is to be in a vibrant city with all kinds of different cultures, meeting and mingling and learning from each other. And that's exactly what I want to do in this state.
Yeah. I'm sorry to go from that beautiful tapestry to BART, but I do want to ask, Ryan did ask specifically about public transit. That is a key part of vibrant urban life in California cities. What would and so many of those agencies are
We need to support our public transportation. We absolutely do. We need to make it cheap and available for people to get places. We need to build transportation from where there are places, a lot of people, to the places where they want to go to. That is going to be a critical part of the state working. We cannot have hour-and-a-half commutes as the standard for this state. For a whole bunch of reasons, transportation is by far the biggest pollution in the state of California on a climate basis or just on an overall health basis. We're going to have to be doing we need to build, and we need to build around public transportation, and we need to build more densely, and that's just the truth.
Yeah, I assume you're a Bay Area resident, you vote in San Francisco. Are you supporting this? There's going to be a ballot measure, it looks like, this November to fund BART, fund Caltrain.
I will.
Fund Muni.
Yes.
And what do you see as the role of the next governor in all this? Because this has been, it seems like every year we're facing a fiscal cliff with a lot of these agencies.
So let me say something. I mean, I think there's been a sense, and certainly there have been best-selling books written about how poorly we build and how poorly we act in the physical world in this state. And it's true. I mean, if you look at the rate with which we're building houses and you look at some of our big public projects, how over budget they are and how behind schedule they are, honestly, people are writing books about it on a historic basis. And we just can't continue to do that. And look, you're looking at somebody who built a business from scratch. I do math. I hold people accountable. We need to do things in the physical world, and we need to do them at a price that people can afford, and think about how to do that before we start. And then we've got to get it done. And that's really who I am. I'm a very practical person. I want us to succeed. I am Team California. I am absolutely competitive for the people of this state to be prosperous and to succeed. And I want to do it in a way that everybody gets brought along.
Yeah. Another thing Ryan touched on with that question is the streets of our cities. Homelessness, clearly that was such a big issue for this last governor. 1 year he spent his entire State of the State talking about just homelessness. What do you think of the job Newsom has done on that issue? What would you do differently?
Well, look, I think the first thing to remember about homelessness is no one gets well on the street. So keeping people off the street, giving rental assistance to keep people from becoming homeless is money very, very, very well spent. And getting people off the street as fast as possible is the second best thing you can do. And let's talk, I mean, the strategy right now is basically shelters and long-term supportive housing. A lot of people on the street don't want to move into shelters, and that's the truth. They don't feel safe, there's no privacy, they can't bring their animals. Those are three really big deals for people who are living on the street. We need to actually get people into something different that they want. And I think that what's been working across California is emergency interim housing, where you get a room with a key, you get shared dining and laundry facilities, you can bring your animal and you don't have to be clean. That is something that solves people's needs and gets them something they want and they're willing to do. And I think that to a very large extent, we need to be getting people, for their sake, the most compassionate thing we can do is get people off the street. If you look, only 1 in 7 people who become unhoused have a mental health problem or some form of addiction. Only 1 in 7. But being on the street is so dangerous. It is so stressful. You are so vulnerable that it creates massive personal problems that are not easy to solve. And therefore, keeping people off the street or getting them off the street as fast as possible is the most compassionate thing we can do. It's the smartest thing we can do. It's the most effective thing we can do. And by the way, if we're going to have what I'm talking about is safe streets that kids can walk down, fun places for people to go, that's a critical part of California.
Yeah. We have just about 30 seconds left before we wrap up. I want to give you a chance to make closing comments to folks.
Look, you guys, everyone's talking like this is a complicated race. It's not. There's 60 people on the ballot, but only 3 people could possibly be in the top 2. So let's talk turkey for 1 second here. There's a hard-right Republican who's endorsed by Donald Trump, and I don't want to talk about him because I don't agree with him in anything, literally. So if you're going to vote for him, you're not going to vote for me. Second of all, there's a corporate Dem, Javier Becerra, who's been taking money from all the corporations that I'm talking about restructuring their bottom lines, which is Chevron, the second biggest oil company in the state, Meta, Uber, all these. He's got money from the biggest lobby against single payer. And being asked, he said, asked what he would change last week, he said, the state's doing really well. He didn't really have an answer. If you want change in this state, if you believe this state is unaffordable for Californians, if you want to take on the corporate interests, there's only one person who can possibly be in the top 2 who's saying that, and it's me. Yeah. I'm the change person. I'm the person who's going to take on the corporate interests, and I'm the person that working people are behind. That is the choice in this election. Do we want to change? Do we want to take on the corporate interests? Do we want to drive down costs? If you do, I'm the person.
All right, Tom Steyer, thank you so much for your time this evening. I really appreciate it. And I want to let folks know this is, as I said, the last of our town halls with gubernatorial candidates. You can watch the previous ones that we did at youtube.com/KQED Live. For more election coverage and resources, you can check out our voter guide. That's at kqed.org/voter guide. And you can listen to all of our interviews with the leading candidates for governor, not all 62, but a few of them, on Political Breakdown, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to all of you for taking time tonight to attend, for everyone watching at home, listening at home, and have a great night.